Good evening, everyone. We are going to get underway shortly. Not sure if you're going to be able to hear the piano right now. It's not mic'd yet and there's candles on it, but you'll be able to hear Amanda shortly.
Good evening. Welcome to our Maundy Thursday service. And I'm going to introduce our service in a moment, but it occurs to me that our modern lesson may be a little much for our little ones. So when we get there, I'd be happy to take them out for a couple minutes, if that's okay. Okay. Sorry, I talked about that earlier, but I didn't have time enough to rethink another plan. So we are continuing our series on James Cone's book, The Cross and the Lynching Tree. And some of you have heard some about James Cone during worship these past weeks. James Cone was a father of Black liberation theology, and he was born in 1938 in Bearden, Arkansas. In one of his first books, written in 1972, The Spirituals and the Blues, he writes, "The power of song in the struggle for Black survival, that is what the spirituals and blues are about. On Saturday nights, the jukebox was loud and one could hear the sound and feel the rhythm of the blues even from a distance. The men and women gathered around the jukebox who had worked hard, long hours during the week in the sawmills and factories. By Saturday night, they were tired and weary. They needed to express their moods and feelings, their joys and sorrows. They needed to refresh their spirits in the sound and rhythm of Black humanity." He also goes on to write that on Sunday mornings, at Macedonia AME Church, the Spirit of God was no abstract concept, no vague perception of philosophical speculation. The Spirit was the power of God unto salvation. That wheel in the middle of the wheel, the Spirit was God breaking into the lives of people, building them up where they were torn down and propping them up and leaning on every side. The Spirit of God's presence with the people and God's will to provide them the courage and strength to make it through. And the people were thankful for God's presence and renewed weekly their covenant to hold out to the end. He writes, "I can hear it now, my mother singing her favorite song. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine." And it's fitting tonight, we start off with light. The light of hope and beauty that proclaims that despite moments of darkness, God's light brightens the world. And it is this light that we celebrate as we begin our journey with the Last Supper, the celebration of Jesus's pouring himself out to us and to the world. We begin with that light. And as we move through the service, the light will be dimming as we move towards the cross. As we move through our service, we will be given opportunities to pray. moments of silence or as we read scripture or sing song. And we invite you to think about, to pray about the brokenness of this world as we reflect on stories and songs about crucifixion, about death, but also about hope and life. We will be watching the modern lesson is a reflection from a disciple's minister about the song Strange Fruit from Billie Holiday. Many of you are familiar with. It was a protest song that she sang at the end of every performance. At the end of every performance, as we'll hear in the video, they would dim the lights and everyone would be silent. And she would sing that song and leave stage. That's what we're going to do this evening at the end of the service. It will get a little bit darker and quieter. And I'll invite you that are able and would like to come forward, and we'll take items, candles from the table, and we'll leave the sanctuary in silence, preparing the table for Easter, leaving it bare in preparation for Easter. I want to also mention, as we reflect on the stories of our faith, of the stories of the Passion, we'll be responding to them with spirituals from the African American tradition. James Cone's entire career, he leaned on and pulled from the African American spirituals and the blues as being so important to Christian faith, to finding strength in the midst of despair. So we're going to lean on that tradition this evening. Let us begin.
I invite you to take a moment to center yourself. Maybe take a deep breath. Put your hand on your heart if that feels right. Feel your feet on the floor. We'll begin this evening's journey with the song, Be Still My Soul. Let's sing together. Be still my soul, for God is on your side. Bear patiently the cross of grief or pain. Trust in your God, your Savior and your God, who through all changes faithful will remain. Be still my soul, your best, your heavenly plan, to guide my future surely as the past. That's not the next verse. Can you see that? There it is. Be still my soul, the hour is facing on, when we shall dwell with God forevermore. When this appointed meet. We shall meet at last. Throughout Lent, we have been exploring the book that Jason just spoke about, The Cross and the Lynching Tree, and I'm thinking about the cross in various ways. And the cross has always been something a bit peculiar to me. We wear it as a symbol of faith, and yet it was the exact thing that Jesus died on. And this song that I found to take us deeper into worship ponders that. It ponders the cross that we worship, that we follow, that we take up, and that we find Jesus. It might be new to you. It was new to me. So I'll play it through once so that you can hear it, and then we'll sing it together. How can we worship Caesar's cross of torture, death, and fear, a weapon of an unjust world, coercive and severe? How can we follow history's cross when cross-marked banners blaze, the way for raiding regiments to terrorize and raise? How can we take up fashion's cross, worn cold and burnished gold, yet born in empty apathy, style swiftly bought and sold? How can we find in Jesus' cross a justice all can see, true peace that heals, restores, and builds with passion fierce and free?
I invite you to join in this litany as we center ourselves. Jesus said, I give you a new commandment, that you love one another just as I have loved you. You also should love one another.
On this night, Jesus gathered with his disciples in the upper room.
On this night, Jesus took a towel and washed the disciples' feet as Mary had washed his feet.
On this
This
night,
night,
Jesus broke bread and poured wine, inviting them to eat and drink
of
of the cup of new life.
On this night, Jesus was arrested and later tortured and killed by the Roman Empire, who sought to silence him and his followers' vision of peace and justice through violence, fear, and death. And I invite you up in a moment for communion. I know there's many heavy things on our hearts this year. There is much brokenness in our world. There is war amongst us, not only in Ukraine, although I know we are all brokenhearted for the devastation in that country, for the children and families and civilians. But the wars that continue in Syria, the refugees in Palestine, all the places of brokenness in this world. Communion is a time to celebrate our unity in God's love, to strengthen ourselves, to find hope and joy together. And I believe Ron is going to do a prayer. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, I'm sorry. We didn't. I'm sorry. Come, all is ready. Sorry. Body of Christ. Body of Christ. Body of Christ. Body of Christ for you. Body of Christ. Body of Christ. Body of Christ. You. Christ. You. Body of Christ. You. Body of Christ. For you. Body of Christ. Body of Christ. For you. Thank you. Body of Christ. For you.
Keep your lamps trimmed and burning. Keep your lamps trimmed and burning. Keep your lamps trimmed and burning. For the time is drawing nigh. Sisters, don't grow weary. Brothers, don't grow weary. Children, don't grow weary. For the time is growing nigh.
We begin our journey of spirituals with this song, Keep Your Lamps Trimmed and Burning. And we've been singing this throughout Lent as an invitation to remember the life that's to come while we journey into darkness. You might know my good friend Andrea, and she's going to join me for some songs. So we invite you now to sing with us. We are climbing Jacob's ladder.
We are climbing Jacob's ladder. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. Now the time is drawing nigh. Sisters, don't grow weary. Brothers, don't grow weary. Children, don't grow weary. For the time is drawing nigh. Every round goes higher, higher. Every round goes higher and higher. Every round goes higher and higher. And the time is drawing nigh. Sisters, don't grow weary. Brothers, don't grow weary. Children, don't grow weary. For the time is drawing nigh. Keep your lamps trimmed and burning. Keep your lamps trimmed and burning. Keep your lamps trimmed and burning. For the time is drawing nigh. Sisters, don't grow weary. Brothers, don't grow weary. Children, don't grow weary. For the time is drawing nigh.
That is a modern lesson, Jason.
Yeah, she's getting there.
It was a night of August 7th, 1930. It was a very, very hot night. It could have been anywhere, USA, but this time it was in Marion, Indiana. This time in the heartland.
This time, the day before, a white man had been shot and his girlfriend, they said, had been assaulted and raped. A mob gathered. The white man who had been shot died in the hospital that night, and the police took off his bloody shirt. They took it and ran it up the flagpole in front of the police headquarters for the whole city to see.
James Cameron, 16 years old, he was there that night and barely escaped being lynched himself.
He said that bloody shirt was like waving a red flag in front of a bull.
Benjamin Franklin said that a lynch mob is a beast with many hands and no brains. Anywhere, USA, but this time in the heartland.
And God planted a garden in Eden, in the east, and there God put the human being whom God had made.
And out of the ground God made every tree grow.
Every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. And the tree of life also in the midst of the garden.
And the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
And God commanded the human being, you may freely eat of every tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. For on the day that you eat of it, you shall die.
As soon as Adam and Eve saw that, that was the red button. The worst thing you could say is don't touch it. They wanted to know. And so they reached for the fruit. They wanted to know, to eat and discover the truth of pain, racism, indifference, and violence. Apples don't do that. This was strange fruit. They saw themselves, strange fruit. And the truth hit them. They did not want this, but it made them powerful. Powerful enough to see their own pain, powerful enough to dish it to others. Fruit bears fruit. They became powerful enough to make their own southern trees bear strange fruit. Blood on the leaves and blood at the root. Black bodies swinging in the southern breeze, strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees. Pastoral scene of the gallant south, the bulging eyes and the twisted mouth. Senna magnolias, sweet and fresh. Then the sudden smell of burning flesh. Here is fruit for the crows to pluck, for the rain to gather, for the wind to suck, for the sun to rot, for the trees to drop. Here is strange and bitter crop.
The police took 3 young men into custody late that night.
Thomas Shipp, 19, Abraham Smith, 18, his friends called him Abe, and James Cameron, 16 years old.
And the crowd started to grow outside that jail. People from all over the county came, a mob of 4,000 people or more.
Someone in the mob went to the hardware store for rope. They were armed with sledgehammers and crowbars. They started banging on the jail doors. The sheriff wouldn't open them.
They kept banging and beating, and finally the mob prevailed. They were ready for the performance. The carnival of white supremacy to make sure that blacks stayed in their place.
The tree had given birth to strange fruit, Thomas Shipp and Abe Smith, and the lynching tree of Calvary. It was Jesus on the lynching tree, strange fruit.
They broke into the jail and took Thomas Shipp out of his cell first. They beat him, they spit on him, they mocked him, they killed him before they even got out of the jail. And then they slung a rope over a tree and lynched him, even though he was already dead.
Pilate said to them, "Here is the man." When the crowd saw him, they shouted, "Crucify him, crucify him." Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and crucify him. I find no case against this man."
Then they went back in for Abe, dragging him a block and a half to the courthouse square. Abe was still alive all the way to the courthouse, where there was a maple tree and another noose that was tied around his neck.
People who were there that day said that as they were lifting him up, he reached for the rope. He tried to hold it away from his neck, so they lowered him down and broke his arms. They lowered him down and broke his arms and lifted him up again. and carrying the cross by himself, he went out to what is called the place of the skull, which in Hebrew is called Golgotha. There they crucified him, with him and two others, one on either side, and Jesus between them.
The town photographer set up his equipment and took a picture of the scene. It looked like a carnival with people going to the county fair. After the picture was taken, the mob took strips of Thomas and Abe's clothes as souvenirs.
They divided his clothes among themselves, casting lots to decide what each should take.
One person took a shoe home to display on their mantle, and the most prized souvenir was a piece of the rope.
2 a.m., the coroner came to take the bodies down, but the crowd refused. They turned him away. The bodies must hang as a warning.
They must hang as a warning for blacks to stay in their place.
And as much as I want to say that we made it and look at King and Obama and Oprah and Mae Jemison out of space with the people who 100 years ago would have made her a slave, is it really true that we made it, or really true that we not hanging? Just, well, what's really true? Empty trees or empty promises from politicians over schools, the lynching, the gallant South pastoral scenes, bulging eyes, twisted mouths, see it, but they can't mention the sin of Magnolia in New Orleans. That's the projects where Cash Money Records came. And if one make it while every other broke in prison and naked, tell me why we celebrating Lil Wayne? The fame and the popular. Ignore the hanging from the poplar. Jim Crow threw the rope away, now he popping you, pill popping you, gun popping you, opportunity stopping you. Tell Trayvon parents that we made it, because they just lynched him. The smell of the burning flesh. The news tell of a burning mess. New hell shutting down clinics, but they building up new jails. Diamonds in his ear, gold rope, but it's still lynching. So who writes the new songs to come help right the new wrongs? I see my little brother, I tell him the fight's on. Keep your lights on, keep your clothes on. Cause the more you sell, they will prevail. The more money we make, the less we can tell. The less we speak, the more hate overwhelms. And so we must yell. Who writes the new songs to come help right the new wrongs?
Thousands of copies of this photograph were sold all over the country. And then, a handful of years later, Abel Maripol, a white Jewish high school teacher from the Bronx, came across the photograph. After seeing such a horrible thing, he could not remain silent. He wrote a protest poem entitled Strange Fruit, and then set it to music. It was a protest song against the terrorism known as lynching. The poet took the terror and turned it against itself. What was meant for fear, he used to stir up faith in a different kind of future. The poet flipped the script. The poet took art and degradation and reversed it, remaking it into the art of dignity and indignation, the art of protest. The prophet's art of justice and hope was used by the poet.
Soon after, at Cafe Society, New York's first integrated nightclub, a young singer named Billie Holiday began performing Strange Fruit to close out all of her shows.
Because of the power of the song, the nightclub owner drew up some rules. First, the room would be in darkness except for a spotlight on Holiday's face. Second, the waiters would stop all service while she sang the song. And third, under no circumstances would there be an encore. Night after night, she could not and would not remain silent. Night after night, she flipped the script. She took the art of degradation and reversed it into the art of indignation, the art of dignity, of protest, the prophet song of justice and hope, night after night after night after night, until the whole world was listening.
And when Adam and Eve touched that tree, God saw strange fruit. God saw Abe and Ship and all those who were hung up in trees to die. God saw Jesus. God saw it all. But God had a plan for redemption, a plan to flip the script, to save us from ourselves, to use strange fruit to redeem a strange world.
Then the angel showed me the river of the water of life, bright as crystal.
Bright as crystal,
And on either side of the river was a tree of life,
bearing 12 crops of the most beautiful fruit.
and the leaves on that tree are for the healing of the nations.
Strange fruit in the garden, strange fruit on the cross, strange and healing fruit flowing from the tree of life, whose leaves are good for the healing of the nations.
This year is the 75th anniversary of Billie Holiday's
Flipping the script, we begin our journey from the Last Supper to the cross. We begin with the Gospel of Matthew as he tells the story. When it was evening, he took his place with the 12, and while they were eating, he said, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me." And they became greatly distressed and began to say to him, one after another, "Surely not I, Lord." He answered, "The one who has dipped his hand into the bowl with me will betray me. The Son of Man goes as it is written of him. But woe to that one by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better for that one not to have been born." Judas, who betrayed him, said, "Surely not I, Rabbi." He replied, "You have said so." And continuing in Matthew, then Jesus said to them, you will all become deserters because of me this night, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flocks will be scattered. Peter said to him, though all become deserters because of you, I will never depart you. Jesus said to him, truly I tell you, this very night, before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times. Peter said to him, even though I must die with you, I will not deny you. And so said all the disciples.
We must walk this lonesome valley. We have to walk it by ourselves. Oh, nobody else can walk it for us. We have to walk it by ourselves.
The story continues, the Gospel of Luke. He came out and went, as was his custom, to the Mount of Olives, and the disciples followed him. When he reached the place, he said to them, pray that you may not come into the time of trial. Then he withdrew from them about a stone's throw, knelt down, and prayed. Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me, yet not my will be done, but yours. Then the angel from heaven appeared to him and gave him strength. In his anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down on the ground. Now for Mark. They went to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to the disciples, "Sit here while I pray." He took him, Peter and James and John, and began to be distressed and agitated. And he said to them, "I am deeply grieved, even to death. Remain here and keep awake." And going a little farther, he threw himself on the ground and prayed that if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. He said, "Abba, Father, for you all things are possible. Remove this cup from me, yet not what I want, but what you want." He came and found them sleeping, and he said to Peter, "Simon, are you asleep? Could you not keep awake for 1 hour? Keep awake and pray that you may not come into the time of trial. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." And again he went away and prayed, saying the same words. And once more he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were very heavy, and they did not know what to say to him. He came a third time and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? Enough. The hour has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners." Now from the Gospel of John, John 17. After Jesus had spoken these words, he looked up to heaven and said, Father, the hour has come. Glorify your Son, so that the Son may glorify you, since you have given him authority over all people, to give eternal life to all whom you have given him. And this is eternal life, that they may know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom you have sent. I glorified you on earth by finishing the work that you gave me to do. We continue in John. I am not asking you to take them out of the world, but I ask you to protect them from the evil one. They do not belong to the world, just as I do not belong to the world. Sanctify them in truth. Your word is truth. As you have sent me into the world, so I have sent them into the world.
Deep river, my home is over Jordan. Deep river, I want to cross over to Campbell. Oh, don't you want to go to that gospel feast, that promised land, where all is deep river, I want to cross over to
The story continues in John 18 with their rest in the garden. After Jesus had spoken these words, he went out with his disciples across the Kidron Valley to a place where there was a garden, which he and his disciples entered. Now Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, because Jesus often met there with his disciples. So Judas brought a detachment of soldiers together with police from the chief priests and the Pharisees, and they came there with lanterns and torches and weapons. When Jesus, knowing all that was to happen to him, came forward and asked them, "Whom are you looking for?" They answered, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus replied, "I am he." Judas, who betrayed him, was standing with them. And finally, from the Gospel of Mark. Then the soldiers led him into the courtyard of the palace, that is the governor's headquarters, and they called together the whole cohort, and they clothed him in a purple cloak. And after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on him. And they began saluting him. Hail, King of the Jews. They struck his head with a reed, spat upon him, and knelt down in homage of him. After mocking him, they stripped him of the purple cloak and put his clothes on him. Then they led him out to crucify him.
They crucify my Lord, and he never said a mumbling word. They crucify my Lord, and he never said a mumbling word. Not a word, not a word, not a word. They pierced him in the side, and he never said a mumbling word. They pierced him in his side, and he never said a mumbling word. Not a word, not a word, not a word. He bowed his head and died, and he never said a mumbling word. He bowed his head and died, and he never said a mumbling word. Not a word, not a word, not a word.
I invite you to join me in this prayer that Jesus taught his disciples, that has been handed down generation after generation, a prayer that anchors our faith. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. And thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the
Was that
Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Ooh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they nailed him to the tree? Were you there when they nailed him to the tree? Sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they nailed him to the tree? When they laid him in the tomb? Were you there when they laid him in the tomb? Sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there? They laid him in. Were you there when they nailed him to the tree? Were you